this is Justin DeClue, and this is an Important Cinema Club commentary track exclusive. A few months ago, me and Liam O'Donnell, the writer-director of Beyond Skyline, did a commentary track for that film to celebrate the release of the third film in the series, Skylines. Well, that film has come out. You can now find it on Netflix, and I am happy to present to you a commentary track with the writer-director, Liam O'Donnell, for Skylines. Now, I am not included on this track because it was recorded for the Blu-ray release of the film, but it did not end up making it on the disc. So here, you can listen to it for free. All you have to do is watch Skylines, go, man, it would be really fun to hear all the behind-the-scenes story from its writer-director, and then bring it up on your Blu-ray, on VOD, or on Netflix, and I will count you down to when you should hit play. And hit play in 3, 2, 1, play.
Hello, I am writer, director, producer of Skylines, Liam O'Donnell. What you're hearing right here is the track Trent Noir, done by a good friend of mine, Anthony Scott Burns, a fantastic director and amazing musician as well, known as Pilot Priest. We met about 10 years ago at Hydraulics after I saw some of Anthony's shorts, and we talked about projects, and sometimes that's just the way things work, and I needed a synth track for Trent's theme. I wanted something sort of badass and a throwback to a sort of Carpenter score, and Anthony's new movie Come True had come out, and I remembered that he was excellent at this, and it became a really cool late addition to the movie sonically. So there's definitely, I've always wanted to do an opening narration, something like this. That was one of my favorite movies. I think you probably tell from watching this is The Fellowship of the Ring, and this is like, what's the Skylines version of a Lord of the Rings opening narration, and it's multiple purposes for it. Is one, and I always like to have the movies stand alone, so that if anyone's watching this, 10, God hopes 20 years from now, and they see this movie, they can kind of get the whole story in one. And two is because this wasn't a pre-designed trilogy. Some of the rules and the way that we've figured these characters out as we've gone, it's like Grant says, it's pretty complicated. So let's just try to get the beats down as quickly as you can and catch up on this crazy story about Rose and her powers and her origin. And we're really thankful that Frank Grillo and Bojana Novakovic, little Elena Jairaj, were so kind enough to let us use this footage, because I think it really helped ground everything emotionally and set up our world. It doesn't really get any better than having James Cosmo do the opening narration, which a lot of this he did live around the campfire, and was just a marvel to behold. But the other purpose I think it did was it helped us subtly shift the genre up front into more of an adventure story, and it also allowed me to condense what my first draft of this space battle was like 10 pages with gravity shifts within the cockpit and them escaping blast wave. Once I kind of locked into the narration, it allowed everything to condense and just kind of have a shorthand for all of the stakes and the emotion. And this would be my first opportunity to talk about Lindsay Morgan and how incredible. This was our first day of shooting on green screen. It was like an X day, half a day. And she just came in so locked in and ready for this moment. It really set the tone for the entire shoot. Visual effects wise, this was the first thing that we started working on, and it was this right here was the last shot, one of the last shots that we finished. It was really hard developing that look and style of our space and ships for this film, which are a little different from Beyond, and it's a tribute to everybody at Lip Sync in Soho who worked on almost every single space shot and spaceship shot in the film. Specifically, shout out to Adam Buckner, who was our VFX supervisor there. This was our first look at the tent village, which we shot on the backlot in Vilnius, Lithuania. And you see again the great James Cosmo, who everyone that even actors like Daniel Bernhardt who weren't in this scene, he came to watch him act and just kind of like stand next to me at the monitor with a big smile on his face because it's just so fun to watch him work. Speaking of which, I cannot say enough good things about our male lead here, Jonathan Howard playing Leon, who walked right into this scene brazenly, owning it, and giving a really nuanced performance. One of the things we discussed this evening was that Leon actually doesn't like his job. So even though he can manipulate young Kate here and he can intimidate people, there's a part of him that isn't really, his whole heart isn't behind it. And I think that's kind of the key to Leon in general, is that, you know, it could be such an unlikable performance that he has to be kind of a jerk to Rose and kind of catching her and bullying her a little bit. But he still has some sort of underlying sympathy so that he never really loses the audience, despite how bad his behavior may be at some times, that we kind of always sense that there's a deeper sensitivity beneath. And hopefully, you know, he can be redeemed, and you know, eventually the audience will actually fall in love with this guy, and that's just a really difficult tightrope to walk. And you know, I just couldn't have been more impressed with Jonathan coming in. This is one of his first nights acting against a legend like James Cosmo and just completely owning it.
This tent was in and out a few times, but we really kind of condensed it just to these essential beats of seeing the blood and knowing that she had a ticking clock and needed to get a refill. This shot was one of the hardest visual effects in the movie. Went through several iterations, and Red Visual Effects from London ended up coming in and doing both of these shots, which were awesome and in the higher difficulty. We added this pilot here from Scope, who did the rest of these, and this is all right outside of one of our warehouses in Vilnius, Lithuania. It's our little sprawl section showing, you know, our future city of red pilots and humans living together. And here we have the lovely Rona Mitra playing Dr. Mao. I've been a fan of hers since Ali G's Into House, which, if you haven't seen, it's a deep pull, and she's delightful in it as always. But obviously a big fan of Neil Marshall's Doomsday. And this was a role that we thought of in a couple of different ways. And then once her name was floated, it just made way too much sense. Rona was just so great at grounding all of this medical sci-fi mumbo jumbo. She's done it before. And thanks to her heavy lifting, we really get to enjoy having Yayan back in the movie, which was an insane decision that I love with all my heart. I also really enjoyed the energy between the two of them, which this was the first day of shooting this scene. And I kind of realized it was something that you don't necessarily see a lot of, which was a more seasoned female action heroine kind of mentoring a younger one. It's quite common in males, and it wasn't something that I really was even conscious of from the get-go. But then once you see them on set, you're like, oh, right. And that obviously manifested into more ideas the farther we got into filming. So that's Ray the alien, which is a shout out to Neil Hopkins' Ray from the first Skyline, who was the first human in the group abducted in the penthouse. Bonus if you ever caught that. This was Fong and Tane from Real Deal Stunts, two of our fight stunt coordinators, action designers, choreographers. They're all multi-talented gentlemen. This is a very complicated shoot because main unit had to shoot Lindsay first, and then second unit had to shoot Johnny's side and Natalie Walsh doing our Rose stunt double doing a lot of the stunts. So it was the first time I ever worked with a second unit, and there's some growing pains. It was even stuff like with the lenses and the angles matching, and I think we definitely got better at it as we went. But it's a fun little action scene, little first act. It was one of those things I wanted to show that Rose had learned from Frank and Sua and all the badasses of the Resistance that once she got old enough, they obviously taught her how to fight. We had another scene here of them getting loaded in, but it worked better to just trim this and get onto the truck, which is one of my prouder scenes just because we had a scene with this information much later in the movie. And when I realized when we filmed it that it was going to not be the right time, I knew we needed to talk about Mark, Corley, and Rose's past right up front, right here. And so that morning, which Lindsay and Johnny were both just supposed to be in this truck for like a shot and walk into the bunker. And I was like, hey guys, we're here. We have a half day. I wrote this on my iPhone. Can we film it? And so we had, 2 lenses, drove back and forth that road a few times, and they nailed it. I'm actually sitting in the seat right in front of them, holding a single microphone, which was really just a scratch track because we had to ADR everything. And this was a Soviet bunker outside of Vilnius, which was one of the more harrowing scouts I've ever been on. The air in here just does not smell right. They were using it for an actual interactive theater, which sounded quite fascinating. But I realized that we could just film the door. As cool as the insides looked, I'm like, I'm good using stages for the hallways. I really did not like the feeling of being in there. So this is now into a warehouse that we had rented for a couple of our different sets. Which brings us to the man. Of course, it's a Predator homage shot there. It was just I couldn't help myself. We were almost moved on, but I was like, let's just do a little insert here. They did do a full Predator homage, just grabbing each other and flexing, but even I have my limits. so be thankful. There is some restraint here. There was a little bit of a longer scene, longer entrance in here, but I ended up choosing to come in on the old classic whiskey glass pour, which brings us to General Radford, played by Alexander Siddig. Just an incredible actor and a gentleman as well. He did this for like 3 hours this day without stopping, just resets, very simple, easy adjustments. Oh, go again for camera sort of thing. And I remember he turned and asked our AD Elliot if he could have some tea. And Elliot's like, well, it's almost lunch. I was like, Elliot, get the man some tea. He's been reciting like 5 pages of dialogue. These holograms were put together by an old friend of mine, Matthew Santoro, who's another fantastic filmmaker in his own right, another great director. Luckily, with the pandemic, I had a lot of friends available who could come on and hit up different parts of this movie, and so we're really lucky to get this, very cool, slightly throwback but new feel for these holograms. Now, the blocking here was interesting, obviously just from the beginning with the whiskey glass, the fact that she takes it, kind of invites him in. At that point, he's now really trying to seal the deal all the way through. But every time he gets close to her, she kind of pulls away. She keeps her distance. But he just knows exactly, the right chords to play to pull her in. And that includes, bringing up the most traumatic experience that she has in the Armada vessel's destruction and the extra ship's destruction. And it's really the biggest mystery to her. I know a lot of people are maybe hoping for more mysteries about the aliens to be delved into. But to me, it was more about what's the more interesting mystery to Rose. And she isn't quite sure what happened to her in that moment and why she wasn't able to come through and what's been blocking her. And so that's sort of what is more driving her, what's more driving the character through this story. Cobalt 1. Where did I come up with that name? I think Cobalt was an armor color in Halo. And I think you can tell from this movie I really loved playing the first Halos. And I just loved that. It's obviously a type of blue, a shade of blue. and it just felt like a great name for a planet. And, since you always need to add a number to the name, but Cobalt 1 just kind of rolls off the tongue. Everybody seemed to like it. This montage was all much longer scenes. I guess not much longer, but they all had like reactions, entrances, and exits. And Rose kind of was just cracking jokes about how much she didn't want to be around Owens and Leon for that matter. You can tell from her expression, the look was saying it all. And it just needed to be faster. And so Barrett and I just kept exploring and trying to condense it as much as possible, using different parts. The bigger scene was this Z and Alexi scene, where they had more interaction, where Z and Alexi could actually hear what Rose was saying on the other side, and they explained to her how the whole interplanetary travel worked, which we realized, we didn't need to do. We could do it just within one single hologram. This scene used to be a lot longer, and that will be in the deleted scene, and it's one of the ones I missed the most. But again, we just wanted to get the energy moving forward because we knew we were about to come into a long dialogue-heavy scene here with my main man, Trent, played by Jeremy Fitzgerald, who reprised his role from Beyond as our lead pilot actor. And the eyes for Trent in every single shot, almost every single shot, were done by one VFX artist, Justin Martinez, who would act out the eyes himself and then kind of put them within the shot. And he did an incredible job. And it's like the performance is twofold. And it's also a tribute to Lindsay, who really is the person that ultimately brings him to life because of the way that she treats him and the way that she just regards him. If you look at her face, like there's always genuine love and concern for this big foam latex alien. And to me, that's the magic trick. This was one of those days on set that I just was thanking the movie gods, like, oh my God, this is going to work because she's bringing him to life. Look what she's giving me. We did do a lot of takes. There was a lot of dialogue, obviously, and even in the original scripted version, I didn't have the subtitles. He had a lot of growls, and we kind of knew what he was saying, but I wasn't 100% sure that was the route we were going to go. So a lot of her dialogue had these different, what do you mean this? What do you mean that? And kind of pulling you along. And once we got into post, we realized we didn't need that once we added the subtitles and kind of tightened everything up. This was another one of those moments that just, made me really happy because you have to buy in that Trent cares for her. And when he grabs her hand here, and this shot right here, I always get a little bit of a flutter myself. And so, again, it was just like, oh man, we have it. We have this movie. This is the dynamic that I wanted. And why are they always wet? I think just like the thumbs line was an ad lib from Lindsay, quite possibly aided by her friend who was with us on set, Renee Lovett, who is also quite a witty comedian. And so they would do their, scene readings, and then they'd come in the next day and have all these funny ad libs that I was more than happy to add. Again, this was one of my favorite scenes in Beyond Skyline between Frank and Elena, and it wasn't originally going to be in the movie, but we had her waking up, and we thought, this is a nice, interesting place to put, a dream sequence in there, and then add even a little bit more foreshadowing with the matriarch. And really, really, again, stoked that we were able to use that footage. And here's another ad lib idea that Lindsay brought to me with her having a towel post-shower. I think this is the type of thing that a male director like myself would probably not think of. but she was like, "You just said that I'm showering. My hair would still be wet." It's not something that ever occurred to me, but it made it quite funny to me. And again, it wasn't something that I'd ever seen before in an action movie. Here is our lovely armory set, which, was established in Beyond Skyline in a more biomech setting. And the idea here is that the humans have now retrofitted around the alien ship, which continues to the bridge. This is, in theory, the same bridge from the prologue sequence, but now they've put a bunch of steel beams in there and kind of contained it off from the rest of the ship so that it's a little bit more human scaled. The equipment is a lot of found items that we got from the studio from previous productions and retrofitted and slapped in there. The steel beams were ours and the console were ours, but that's part of indie filmmaking. You got to use everything that you got. And this is our first real team scene. These scenes are always really difficult to shoot because you have so many different actors and angles that you need to cover. I didn't feel like we got all of them this day, so it's a little bit more rapid fire of a cut than I think I would have wanted, but I'm pretty happy with how it all turned out. But what was great about the final edit compared to the script is that she was basically saying no from the end of the general scene to all of the meetings in the hallway to Trent's room. In Trent's room, she's obviously refusing to Trent and kind of asking him to convince her. So we already kind of knew how she felt. And by getting rid of all of that, it set the table better for Rose here to just kind of say, like, well, you have half a plan. And we realized that she's been taking all of this in and she's been thinking the whole time. And she's got questions for them. They've got answers, but they're not the best answers. And that there does still feel like there's some holes within this whole thing for how crazy of a mission it all is. And I think I felt like that as the screenwriter, so I was just having her constantly kind of poke holes into my logic. And I think ultimately I was like, okay, let's save it all for this one scene and unload it on the general. But we've already emotionally put her into a corner with Trent and the stakes of the world that we know she has to ultimately say yes. So that ended up being a much more satisfying direction to go in. Those consoles and holograms were, again, another Matthew Santoro effect that was not something that I was originally thinking of. I was just thinking of kind of a hologram in the middle. And he came up with this really cool skin overlay that brought it all up another level. Here's our beautiful hallway. Thank you, Cedric. Thank you, Perrin. Now, this is obviously the same life pod that she's in. We only built one life pod, people. So that's just Lindsay looking into a glass window to nowhere. And then we shot on a separate splinter unit, I guess second unit, that shot of Cha and Yeva. But I always loved this shot of Rose right here. She looks like she's in a World War II propaganda poster or something. It's just sort of a magic lighting that Alon did for that little bit. And Lindsay, she again came up with this sort of salute to Owens, which was better than any line. So this is a really cool sequence where we're setting up. We kind of condensed something later where they had to manually turn the ship to blue, and we put it into this warping sequence here as all sort of one thing. And Scope out of Cologne did amazing post-viz for that lip sync then did a great job finishing. And this is one of my favorite pieces of score in the movie from our composer, Ram. It's a difficult part, though, because it's such epic outside space shots and then going into a very small, intimate scene. So we definitely tweaked it quite a bit. But I love what he did with it, and I love when it comes full circle at the end. The Life Pod, and again, Leon, maybe having a bladder infection. That could be something that would explain the constant references to him being. Back at the tent village, we see Kate, played by Naomi Tankle. This was her first ever movie role. And it's like, hey, here's who you're going to be paired up with: James Cosmo, Rona Mitra, and Yayan Ruyen. So, no pressure. But she did a great job. And again, this is the Yayan story was something I added a few months before production, and realized he could be fit into the movie. And I'm so happy that he's there. Every time he lifts his cloak there and says his line, I get flooded with happiness. This was one of the more gratifying scenes to film. It was always tricky writing it, but I wanted to explore what it was like for people. There's always been sort of this weird pressure to like show the invasion in different parts of the world. I've talked about this before, but that was some of the original Skyline 2 concepts were like, we'll just do the invasion again in Shanghai or do it in London. And so this was kind of like imagining what his invasion story would have been. And there was talk at one point of actually flashing to it, which would have been cool, but budget constraints. And also, once Jonathan and Lindsay acted the scene out, we didn't feel like we needed it anymore, because when he came in this day, you can just kind of tell some days when it's the reason why he took the role, and it was later in the schedule, so him and Lindsay had a really great rapport already, and a lot of chemistry already built up. And so that's actually the tricky part, is that they had to then kind of remove it while they're still feeling each other out in this scene. And it was one of those days where the rehearsal, of course, like blew everybody away. And in my mind, I'm still like, was that the best take and we didn't film it? But no, he did several better. But it was just like, okay, this is going to be a special day. And the crew kind of gets quieter. And, obviously it's a quiet scene, but it just, everyone was being pulled in by the performance, and it was a great feeling, From a writer to have someone really commit to your words and really bring it to life, it's a great compliment. And I just can't say enough good things about Jonathan in this scene. I really feel like, again, he walked a tightrope, wanting to share something, while still keeping his guard up, and only would do it once she let her guard down. Once she asks him that question, that's sort of the key. This was a longer sequence originally, where they had to kind of go through some of these asteroids, and they were banging the ship, and it just felt like one beat too many. And I wanted to get to seeing Cobalt without sort of starting up the action and then bringing it back down again. I was like, okay, let's... And even the score for this moment was something that we went back and forth on. There's a bigger horn Cobalt theme, but I actually wanted to do more of the Matriarch's theme here to set up, again, the mystery, the lure, and then she's feeling it in this moment, which is kind of all tied in to the siren light to me from the very beginning. That was always the concept of the siren lights in the first Skyline, is that it's this sort of beautiful, alluring light that makes you want to look at it, and it's like looking into it pulls you forward and mesmerizes you, and so that's a little bit of the lure of this planet and the lure of the matriarch Aunt Rose throughout the whole movie. Now, these subdeck holograms were done again by Red VFX out of London, and they went wild with them. Really, really cool. Super happy with how those all came together. Lip Sync, again, handled all of this space and the rings of cobalt, which was something from the very beginning. I think just as a kid, I was always obsessed with Saturn. And I always thought when you saw that the rings were just a bunch of asteroids and dust and debris, it was always kind of disappointing. And so I wanted to make a planet with actual solid rings that she would have to maneuver through. One of the producer's notes, the Greg and Collins notes from early on in the development, was they were like, "It's just one ship; it should be 12." And it's a very typical note from them that it's like, oh, okay. I mean, I get it. Does make sense. One shot might as well make it a huge shot, but ultimately it became a little simpler for everyone to wrap their heads around if it was just another single ship that they crashed into and that was floating around within the rings. Sort of setting up the fact that this planet is going to be abandoned and not quite what they were expecting. Or what Rose was expecting, I should say. This subdeck set was incredibly tricky to shoot in, very claustrophobic, and I found out that my childhood claustrophobia is still quite active. I generally like to get up right in next to the actors and next to the camera. Depending on the day and how I'm feeling, I'll be by the monitors, but I like to keep moving all throughout the day. I did not like being in that tiny little room with everybody. It was hot, and I don't think they liked me being in there either. It was like they didn't have a lot of space to work with, so it was a lot of just kind of poking my head in and trying to, once they were down in the seats and everybody was in place, just kind of go through as many set takes as we could and get the hell out of there. But I think this whole sequence is so well anchored by Alexander, leaning on his Star Trek experience. He just, lends so much credibility to this. And it's kind of a weird setup because the aliens, Trent and Violet, are the ones actually affecting and driving the ship, whereas the humans are kind of stuck there. We had all these switches for them to hit if they felt like they needed to, but story-wise, there's nothing they're really doing. They're just kind of, passengers who can have access to different information, but they can't really affect the outcome. It's all driven by Trent and Violet. Which, again, was one of those things where we knew, okay, we really do need to add subtitles and voices and really, dial in the performances for Trent and Violet. It can't just be grunts and, sort of similar to what we had in Beyond Skyline. We had to actually make them full-fledged characters because they're the ones driving the ship. Here we are back in the tent village, and this was our I think one of our few night shoots. James came to me that day and said, "I got a line from the Wild Bunch I really want to use." And then he read it to me, and I said, "Absolutely. What are you going to tell him?" And of course, after you hear him say it, of course you're going to say yes. And this is Naomi's, kind of big scene here. And again, to be in your first movie in the room with these two. But Rona and James were both very supportive, and Rona kind of gave me advice on how to get her into the right space there. And I went through a couple of different, here's the Wild Bunch. Hell yeah. Went through a couple of different options of Rona's line, aim for the eyes. We had aim for the creases, aim for the heads. And then once I didn't feel like I'd had them really aiming at the eyes a ton. But then once we started doing the VFX, it all looked like we could put a bunch of popping eyes in there, and it worked great. This is my favorite shot in this sequence, that little moment between Z and Lindsay. This whole thing was a much longer kind of couple of different versions of that, which are in the deleted scenes as well. And we had a slow-mo walk down the hallway, with synth bumping. But it also felt like, we just have to, that felt like more like a third act sort of vibe than something that you could be doing right here, where it was time to get out onto the planet.
I feel like I maybe should have mentioned up front that this is a pandemic commentary that I'm recording myself, and I have 4 children in my house, so I usually have to do it at the very end of the night when everyone's in bed, and I've had a glass or 2 of wine, which is why I just listened back to what I just recorded there, and it was pretty low energy. So this is daytime. I'm caffeinated, ready to give you guys a little bit more pep. I love that line from Daniel, the Death or Glory Corp. I mean, that's the type of stuff that he cracks me up every time I see it. Here we had the matriarch, mental sonic feedback, which was something that I had in the script. It felt a little less specific than what it got to once we were filming, and then of course once you're doing the sound and the score. And I'm really happy with how that made the story more cohesive by kind of bringing all those elements together. This was called the ECB sequence in VFX, and it was one that Monocular Films took over, which was my visual effects company. And Scope helped as well. Thomas Loader. This is super cool hologram from Red VFX. Now, this was one of these sequences that originally we were going to shoot in Gran Canaria, Spain, which we scouted, and it just became sort of not feasible for the budget and the shoot, and there's a lot of logistics that go into that. And so again, had to make use of our Cobalt sets in a different way and build this slot canyon up against, was a completely different part. Here, Scope did a fully CG tunnel extension there on the right. There's matte paintings behind, matte paintings down this hallway that they turn to. Bonus points if you notice the leg falling off of Trent while he was walking there on that last shot. Tricky visual effects. And this is our first usage of the flamethrower, the plasma flamethrower as we called it, which Pix and Reel out of Belgium built these props for us. And there's a lot of talk of whether or not we were going to use blue flames or just a different color. But once you get into the planet where everything's blue, to then have blue on blue, this is just getting to be a lot of blue. And it's just simpler to read to have the traditional orange. But I wanted it to, the reference was sort of one of those fire tornadoes where it has a little bit of a spiral to it, because that's why we're using sort of a Gatling gun prop that's been modified to make it look like, this new type of flamethrower that they have. Now this is again, our Cobalt set. Now they're up on top of what they were just walking under. This is what we shot, the very last scene of the movie, actually. A very emotional shoot. The entire cast was taking bets on how many times they were going to have to walk down this hill. There were over and unders. I want to say Jonathan won, but maybe I'm just showing favoritism. I think the number that they had was like 17. He had 17. I think we got to 18. But they were all just goofing and talking shit about me at the top of the hill while I kept having them go down, because we kind of ended almost ahead of schedule. This last 2 days the last day was them walking in the scene before this and then down this. And I almost just didn't want it to end. I kept having them go again and getting different coverage, but we're almost using almost every different type of coverage here. You know, there's steady cam up on the rocks. There's obviously a lot of crane and dolly, and we needed it all because this is kind of the biggest vista viewpoint of the planet with them in it. So I really wanted to milk it out. This shot is a matte painting by Derek Winslow, who was our lead matte painter for Monocular Films, and Justin Martinez comped that together. This was actually our first Cobalt shoot day, and was pretty exciting. Obviously, the biggest difficulty of doing these was it's the first day everyone's in these outfits, and there's a million LED lights, there's a million little pieces of plastic, there's a million things that can break and take a lot of time to reset. So I would say that our first day, and also just is one of the things I learned from Beyond Skyline, like every group shot of, I'd say more than like 3 actors where they're walking from point A to point B takes so much longer than you think, because it's like herding cats. And then everybody always needs their last looks to get them all looking perfectly sweaty, dirty, but still sexy before each and every take. So it can be slow moving. I remember in Beyond Skyline, the walk to the temples was like half a day, and then it rained and I cried. But this was this whole sequence up to this was the first day on Cobalt, and I thought it was going to be half a day, and I'm pretty sure it was a whole day. It was one of the few days we really got behind schedule just from that sort of breaking in the new wardrobes and props and these helmets and the LED lights, and yeah, it was a lot of moving pieces. We had all these bones and skulls actually all over the ground that Fido and Crete made in Spain that were all pilot skulls, but they didn't really read. And I noticed that just on the rehearsal, which is why I put the alien suit there, propped up against the rock. I knew we needed an actual like dead corpse. And then in post, Scope and Monocular, took some chunks out of that poor pilot to help sell the tomb line. And so here we are coming on to one of our first, real good looks at our new alien, which we call the Shadows. Very tricky to figure out this look, and we went through a lot of different iterations. You first kind of developed just doing kind of quick trailers of the movie. One for the Wrap Party, we cut a trailer internally. Chad Van Horn, who is my on-set editor, also cuts a lot of the stuff for me. He did that trailer, and then we farmed one out to AFM in 2019, and Justin Martinez did a quick take on it, but it was hard to get it right. I was kind of coming at it from, I want the shadows to come out and swallow us, and I want them to be like almost like a zero black look. It was like somewhere between Predator and Attack the Block, and I was leaning more towards that cool look from Attack the Block as like a lo-fi solution, because like everything else, we have to use what we already own, and we already own the pilot assets. So I was like, how do I use these 3D assets of the pilots and fuck them up and make them still, usable? So that was the basis of it. And then once we got into post and we're lining them up on these kind of shorter stuntmen that we used from Paris and Berlin, we realized that we were going to have to alter the assets quite a bit. And so we ripped off their dog legs to make it seem like they've even, become decrepit and they're like decaying. And so the back of the dog leg is now like a stump on these shadows, which is pretty cool. And then lip sync really dialed in the actual look of the light bleeding, warping, like I said, somewhere between a predator and Attack the Block alien, which became our shadow alien. As you see there, the actual bone structure and face of it is a pilot, but with certain deformities, like these spikes growing out of its skin, and its eyes are no longer blue. They're supposed to be cataract over. So originally here in the script, I had an argument between Rose and Owens on which way to go, and Rose saying to turn back, and then all of a sudden shit went off, and it was really like on the day, maybe the day before, that I came up with this idea of Rose just getting pulled. And that sort of changed everything and made all of the goals of the action scene so much more clear. And here we see the red power claw. I was very happy that we got that energy sparking in through the darkness. Here you see her cutting between some second unit stuff on Owens and Alexi's side and main unit, with some second unit on the other side. The big main unit part here is Leon coming through on all these bigger crane shots, and him kind of coming all towards Rose. There's a lot of moving pieces in this. I love this little bit. Obviously, Owens had a much longer fight here that I would love to have in the movie, but same as Alexi, it just became a question of every single shot that they're in is expensive, and how many shots, is it going to take to tell that story when we kind of got the gist of what was going on with them, and just overall pacing in the movie as well. It was one of the other lessons of Beyond Skyline is that I learned that we're a hybrid movie, so we're in between. We have martial arts and action elements and sci-fi elements, and there's a kind of a length limit to the fights that we could use. One, just budgetarily to actually have all these parts fit together as a movie, but two, it's like we can't just go off on a very long tangent of action for a long period of time, because there's so much story going on. You kind of and the story's got a lot of different moving parts that you can't take such a long break from it. The action has to all be driving the story forward, or else we lose the audience's attention. That's a great shot. This shot of Rose here was my favorite one that we did on this whole sequence. It was, again, just like showcasing what I love about Lindsay's performance, and Rose in general. It's just that even when she's failing, she's trying as hard as she can. You can't fault her. She wants to save her, but she's just not right at this moment. And here, again, my main man, Trent saves the day. I love this part. I love the music here where we bring back a little bit of the synth score for Trent Noir, and a little homage to Iko Sua's line in Beyond Skyline. But now we actually have an alien saying fucking aliens, which, yeah, of course I laugh every time I'd see that in the screening. Made me quite happy. So Yeva had just a great day on this. It was obviously very taxing and emotional to be sitting there and really feeling this pain and driving this scene and pushing everyone away. But I thought she did an amazing job. It's always a little sad when one of the cast members that everyone's gotten so attached to is going to die for that day. I'm not sure if she came back afterwards. Yes, she did. She did have some stuff to shoot afterwards, but it's still a little bit like a funeral. And it was tough on Lizzie's side of that, of how much emotion and where to find it. And I think we definitely got there. There was a temptation to get more emotional, but I felt like it was just the right balance for someone that she wasn't that close with, but she felt the shame of her thinking that she was this savior and she couldn't even save her. Ba-boom. Implosion grenades, gravity stuff. I mean, that's all going to come back later. Thomas Loader did the first kind of post-viz of that explosion, and then lip sync went really wild with it. I love how kind of strangely hand animated it feels. There's almost a slight Fantasia vibe to it, if that makes any sense, but it's just super cool. This was a different, specifically made corner of the set for this scene, which is another scene that was on the docket for Gran Canaria, but I thought we could really just make it. The first take, the dust mortar that went off right into our suit actor's face, and so he could not see anything for the scene, and you'll see in the post credits he was falling all around. Luckily, he was okay. He kind of stepped into a spot he wasn't supposed to, but I love Transline here. Fuck off, meat sack. This was the day where everyone was coming in hot, and Johnny just knew how, no matter how intense they got, he was going to come over the top of them. And I could see him like in the corner listening to like System of a Down, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a good day. I really love the lighting and the look of this scene. I felt like, in particular, this shot with Lindsay was one of Alon's most beautiful. And I always love it when the in-camera lighting, like helmets or flashlights from beyond, actually light people's faces. This little bit here, because it felt like two scenes, but it's kind of one scene. There was a different version where I had intercut back to the camp for Grant falling asleep, and then we came back to it later, so they were kind of more intercut before. And then almost the very last day of Locking the Cut, there was a version where we took out this scene with Lindsay here all together, and it was worth seeing. I felt like it got the movie down to, the 100-minute sort of runtime that everyone was hoping for. But I just felt like I'd lost track of her emotionally when we came back after the intercut. I felt like in the following scenes, even though she had apologizes pretty much in the scene after this to Johnny, so that it could work, there was too many questions I had about her powers and what was really going on with her. And it was quite interesting because the scene kind of showed up in every bit of marketing and trailer. So it was like almost like an essential scene that, there's a version of it that worked without. But to me, I just felt like I needed to know where Rose was at right there. And I'm really glad that we made that decision to keep it in. So these two different scenes here of Grant falling asleep and Kate patrolling the camp were actually like smaller little intercuts that weren't necessarily supposed to be together. I think one of the lessons from Sean Albertson, who did the last cut of Beyond Skyline, was that he was stop intercutting so much and make each intercut more of a story, more of a complete story, so that the audience doesn't have to keep track of these little bitty things. I think in that one we had like Eco and Frank, where the aliens are trying to storm into the bunker and Frank trying to get into the ship, and we intercutted a ton. And so, yeah, that was a little bit of a lesson that carried over here for me. And of course, Barrett agreed. And this, I think it's stronger when you have the more complete story for each one. This was a last-minute shot that we put in here. Her line wasn't that, and I kind of thought it was a cool way to do ADR by popping back to that long POV, because it's something we're playing with throughout the whole sequence to feel like they're being watched. It was just to clarify that Rona had injected Juana with part of her cure. See some different viewpoints of our tent village. which is a very fun set to play in. Now, this whole little sequence, actually, we had a issue with Rona's flight, so she was like missing for half the day. So I had to kind of shoot everything around a master rather than do the master. So kind of explains some of the coverage decisions here. It hurt my brain, and I think it was the most setups that we did of any day throughout the whole production, because I was trying to cleverly, continue to move and get details so that when she showed up at the end of the day, we were able to just, put in her side of everything at the very end. And thankfully, it all cut together. That shot of Trent's belly wound was one of the last little gore shots I added in, thanks to discussions with Scott Weinberg, associate producer, who was like, could use a little bit more gore. The film was actually going to be PG-13 rated. That was contingent on getting financing. And so, I felt like the story wasn't quite as R-rated in nature as Beyond anyway. So I thought I could make it work, and hopefully I could get, a director's cut or an unrated version. So everything was shot sort of on the line. It wasn't quite as gruesome or brutal as Beyond Skyline. Hoping that I could kind of walk that line, and then eventually they said, no, it all kind of just works, and it's at the right level of an unrated. This would be an R-rated cut, but it's not over the top or anything like that. Originally there was an extra team member. So Alexei was actually a Russian man, and Naomi was, I think she was a Middle Eastern woman, and they were together. They were the couple. And Alexei's head got popped by a shadow when they first entered, and then Naomi died at the end of the sequence, which, part of me still wishes that were true. But again, it's just budget constraints. Even these suits, let alone paying for the actors, it was all just a lot of expense to be doing something on this indie budget. So this was using, again, the Cobalt stages, but reversing it and doing a big green screen behind them so that we could extend it and show the core of the Armada vessel did I just say Armada vessel? Armada vessel core that warped out from when she was destroying that space station and warped back into the planet, into this cavern, which Rose actually had a line explaining that, like, it looks like it warped back into the planet's core, but I was like, it just sounds like sci-fi mumbo jumbo. I'll just explain it on the commentary. That's genius. But no, I do really like the lighting in here, and here's our shadow moment where, once again, you'll notice I'm always trying to get the helmets off the actors' heads. It's like I want them on to establish it, but they're all such good-looking people, you kind of want the helmets off. That's one of my children yelling in the background because, again, this is a pandemic commentary. Shit. This is kind of blown in double shots because it was a rush through day. And you'll notice here's our big Lord of the Rings shot here. Definitely inspired by the Fellowship of the Rings, where all of the orcs are coming out to attack them in the mines of Moria. These shadow shots were all quite challenging and difficult. But shooting this was a joy. You have a couple of guys in leotards kind of circling around them. And we are so fucked. That's a favorite of mine too. We had a very cool dolly rig. It was a 360 circle track that I was spinning around them on this. And we did a lot of slow-mo and a lot of cool stuff. But it ultimately, it kind of wanted to be more steady and more of this crane. It just felt a little bit more in the moment. But I think right there, and you'll see later when he says lock and load, Corporal, are the circle dolly tracks. But right there, that's a little of Bad Boys 2, Michael Bay sort of love, because I love those films. And then you see a nice dynamic pull here on that explosion. And this drone was like, supposed to be the Hydra from Skyline, but the asset did not survive from that long ago. Hydraulics and Greg and Colin provided us with all of the assets that they had, including the mothership and the tankers and the pilots and the harvesters. But the Hydra didn't make it, and so Lip Sync kind of created their own kind of simplistic version of that. And here we are coming inside to the Armada. Why is the Armada orange? Well, because we got tired of all the blue. And it felt like a nice, different change of pace, and that there's obviously some energy with inside here. This place is still operational, and it gave us a little bit more of a complementary colors and an interesting spectrum. This webbing here was just the idea that it's like these big, huge alien cobwebs are kind of built over some of the biomech. This was an interesting kit bash asset that Benny and Thomas cooked up from Scope. And here we are in the core drive corridor here. Now you see these are like what we like to call the diorama sets again. This set looks great from like right ahead. If you start turning the shots too far to the side either way, you're going to see basically through the set. And then on the other side, it was green screen and CG for all of the extensions.
This entire core drive asset sequence was really put together by executive producer and CG supervisor Benny Dietz. And it was a tough one to figure it out if it was all going to work within the cut. I mean, we'd had an earlier scene that we omitted where we kind of set up the core drive layer within our own mothership, and this was a bigger outsized version of it, but trying to figure out how that was all going to work and if the audience was going to buy it, it was very tricky. So getting great post-viz from Benny and Thomas at Scope really helped fill in the blanks for me. And when we had our first screening in December and got feedback from our distributors and sales teams, no one had any questions about this. So that made me very happy. There's more Matthew Santoro holograms. This was one of our few fully green screen sets, which was a green screen ramp that we did towards the end of shooting. And Lindsay got to feel Frank's pain for how much green we had and beyond. But it was one of those days when I was watching her do it in the green and how focused she was that I was just like, there's just no one else who could have really done this movie. The commitment that she gives to this role and how fully invested she is in it. It's just a real pinch myself type of moment. We really played with a lot of different colors in here. We started introducing the purple, which becomes a bigger color now in the back half of the movie, and that because we're within purples and blues, there was a lot of magenta, and magenta was a color that was sort of a dirty word to me coming up in the aughts, and I come to really enjoy the joys of pinks and magentas and especially purple. And there's our big blue siren light moment, which, hopefully doesn't get spoiled by anything online as a moment, because I really liked how that kind of threw the audience for a loop during the early screenings of the movie, and was a nice little throwback to the first Skyline and the entrancing blue light. And now we have Rose entranced. I always like this shot. Trent and Leon have an interesting relationship. And so this was originally two separate scenes where one, she went up against the big DeBrainer harvester from the Beyond Skyline Black Pit sequence. And then later she met up with some actual harvester aliens, these shepherd harvesters. And just to combine them all together was something I came up with in post, having those three guys there to kind of show that this is where they've been hiding since Cobalt was attacked and all of the pilots have been turned into shadows, the actual harvesters retreated into this core, and they've all been hiding down there like it's a bunker. This was an excellent Jeremy Fitzgerald stunt choreo and suit acting. There's only so many people in the world who can do it as well as this guy. And we called it the Trent Batman shot, where he takes out Owens and then puts the power claw to Leon's neck. That was the first take. It was just like, fuck yeah. And this is where people tell you, hey, how did her hair get changed? Such a continuity issue. Well, you can see right there, the tentacle was doing her hair. That was an alien salon. And if you watch movies like that, you're watching movies wrong.
Here we have our baddie, the matriarch, played by Fong Zhang, who is part of Real Deal Stunts. Just a really talented performer, never been in stilts before, never really been in a suit before, and took to it just from pure athleticism and great acting. And here we see the matriarch's face, which was a very lovely bit of retconning I can go into in a second. This was our Waiting for Godot on an Alien Planet scene. Originally, I had them kind of teaming up with Trent, and they had a bigger mission. And budgetarily, it just wasn't in the cards. But so I literally just kind of took them out of the narrative here. And we filmed a longer scene, having some fun with that. So yeah, the Harvester suits from Beyond Skyline, which we called the Shepherd, both the pilot and the Harvester originally were going to have their mandibles and their mouths animated. And when that just proved to be too expensive, it didn't really make sense for me to then do it within the sequel and try to figure that out. So I really liked that we had a sort of Russian doll thing in with the tankers in the first one, and that there's actually an alien with inside an alien. And so I thought, it might be kind of a clever idea to have what we thought was the face of the Harvester open up, and we see there's actually a softer, more intelligent looking being inside. And then that way I could animate its mouth and do a fully CG performance. But then when the action's coming, I'll have that helmet snap back around, and it's a cheaper effect. The tentacles here I thought were really well done. Just in general, I think the matriarch is a fairly seamless creature, from the legs to the tentacles to the face. It's an excellent job with the face designed by Scope and then animated by Lip Sync. Even there, we have some of the eyes from Justin, and I just couldn't be prouder of that character and that creature work across the board. Alan Holt designed the matriarch suit, and then Fido and Crete took care of it on set. There's just a lot of different people coming together to make something special. This was a bit of a longer standoff here, where she actually blasted Trent with the blue light, and he used his blue light blockers that we set up in the first act to stop her from doing it. And that there was a whole lighting change built into that, but it was just going to be too confusing to have Trent have blue eyes during this whole fight. So I wanted to keep his red eyes, and the easiest way to do that was to just cut that bit. So if you always thought, why are they have these blue light things and it never really pays off, that was the payoff. But ultimately, we had pacing issues. We wanted to get this thing tighter, and it just made too much sense to trim that little beat out. I really love that big wide here, that big shot. And this was sort of the crucifixion of Trent, the upside down crucifixion. When I got in here, I think it was around week 3, and I really wanted to do much more graphic, tighter diopter shots, which you saw a lot of on Rose's eyes during the mesmerizing scene with the matriarch. And then we get into some of it here as well. It wasn't until the edit with Barrett that we came up with the idea of reintroducing Mark Corley, Frank Grillo's voice into this moment. And once we did that, we were like, oh yeah, that makes too much sense. That's great. Here we have these pinks and the purples, and the red and the blue energies inside of her combining into this new purple energy, where she's no longer fighting that part of her nature, the blue side. she's kind of embracing all parts, and that's why she's finally coming into her true power. And now we see the payoff of the matriarch's kind of mental interference into Rose's head, that because she has this bit of alien DNA that's been inside of her, that she's able to kind of reach out and interfere with her. That's what stopped her from destroying the Armada, giving the matriarch a chance to escape. And that's what's sort of been haunting her all this time. I love that shot of the matriarch's face. And we have our big alien Cadbury cream egg, the core drive. I mean, I love that sequence down there. I love the risks that we took with the lighting. This was a very kind of fun moment for me, where it was starting the language with Lindsay of how she was going to be using these powers, and that like here she is fully charged up in a way that we've never seen, and all of the pushing and the struggle that was happening, when she was in the cavern with the red power claw is gone. She really just kicks their ass and takes them out quite easily here to show that she's, at a different level. And then here we have, again, if you're watching the movie wrong, it might bother you, but I do love Jonathan Leon's line there about, you look great, just addressing the fact that, wherever you were, whatever you did, I'm digging the new look. This is all make-believe, people. You got to have some fun with it. This was obviously the same set that they came in to start with, but that was filmed on a different day where we only had one wall up. And then here we had built the second wall so that it felt more like a contained corridor that we could fly in and out. I love this twist moment. I just like how we get kind of the double twists of Rose turning on them and then them turning on her. And this was something that I really loved what Jonathan did in this moment. And we kind of did a nice ramp to slow-mo here in the light on her face. Now here we are with a fun sequence that was animated by three animators that I've known for over 10 years that did a lot of big shots on Skylines. One of them was the co-writer of Skyline, Joshua Cordes, who obviously none of this would exist without all of what he's done for this franchise. The other two are Joel Sevilla and Jeremy Butler, and they're three kind of good friends from the East Coast that I was so happy that they were able to come back and contribute and build this little sequence for us, this hallway fight where they animated the harvesters and the shadows. There was a take here where Rose like kind of screamed "You knew" at him, and it worked so good for the energy on set. But then I was like, well, let's, instead of doing the scream at him, use that scream as you're pushing the power out. And I really love that. Obviously, I really enjoy when Lindsay's screaming and grunting and blasting people as hard as she can. Now, this was something that we had developed for earlier in Cobalt Cavern, but I felt like it didn't fit her character for the moment. I felt like Rose, it made her feel too confident in that battle, and that battle was all about being scared and overwhelmed by a new enemy, and then her powers failing her. So it just made too much sense. I think it was only a few days before this when I realized, that bit that we lost out of the Cobalt Cavern, I think it would really work awesome for this. So then I had to really make time in the schedule so that we could get that down. And that entire fight there is all Lindsay. A lot of times we had to use Natalie for Lindsay just because of the schedule of how little time we had. And she had to always be shot on main unit. So it made sense for a lot of Rose's overs to be done by Natalie, but we had the whole afternoon there. And so that's all that wire work was Lindsay. She did a great job. I always laugh at this shot here where it's like a little bit of a recap, like back from commercial break. Kate kind of gives you the update of everything that's going on. And this is one of my favorite shots of the movie. I had it on my phone, and I would just watch the different takes over and over again. There's Rajid, one of our stunt performers, getting his head popped open. Here's a little second unit melee with the creatures. And this was the challenging scene because you have 3 different stunt performers on these massive stilts. And here we are. The payoff. What is this guy doing in the movie? This is why. Again, if it bothers you that he's back, this movie's not for you. And you're not for me. We don't get along because this is what I'm here for. I'm so happy that Justin Martinez was able to add that throat slash out for that effect right at the deadline. So yeah, Rona has mentioned this, but she is just a ton of fun to work with because she understands tone and that she takes everything seriously, but she's not afraid to have a little bit of whimsy and go for it. And so she asked me right before this, do you have a line for me here? And I said, I did write down one in the script, but I was too embarrassed to put it into the pages. Well, just whisper it to me. And I said, no respect for science. And she just looked at me and kind of smiled and said, well, that's a Roger Moore line, darling. I can do that, no problem. And she is, she is the female James Bond as far as I'm concerned. It was so awesome for me to just be like, oh, wow. And then later on, she was just kind of like, what if I said we're not in Kansas anymore? I'm like, well, when you say it, it sounds good. So let's do it. And she started kind of understanding the tone and the vibe of where we were and having fun with it, which is all you can ask for, really. This is really an impressive scene by Lindsay and Jonathan to me, just because of the schedule. I think it's a total of 8 takes, this entire scene. Is a little pocket set that we built in the corner of our Cobalt stages, and I think even the last 2 takes, it was like the crew's gonna turn the lights off. We're done. Jonathan begged them for one more, even though he had already nailed it. But yeah, it's real minimal coverage. I think it's 3 masters, 2 and 2 on them, and it's just the benefit of having also such a great DP who can light something this beautiful and this fast on such a tiny, unremarkable little piece of set, which is basically liquid latex and trash bags stretched over some structure. But I've done quite a bit of work, or we did quite a bit of work with the colorist, kind of making sure your eyes aren't looking back there and that you're focused on Leon and Rose. And I really do love Leon's speech there as well, kind of bringing their arc full circle. And so now it's they're finally together. They're finally, friends. And we start to kind of hit a tone that to me is my favorite part of the movie. Once their kind of inter-character conflict between Rose and Leon is resolved, they really start to have fun together. This was one of the later sets that we shot, and this is the armory set that has been redressed for the Alien Armory version. And I kind of wanted to do just a different style visually fight scene than the rest. So I went to them. I said, I really want to do this as a oneer. And we did it with all of the stunt people kind of getting up and coming back around and working with Johnny. And then we would do a take where there was no one in there and vice versa. I think we only did about 6, and there was 3 really damn good ones. Really happy with how that all came out. Even the shadows, I think, look fantastic in this sequence. And there, that a girl, the beautiful tanker, which I love the way the tanker looks in this film in general. And I love the purple lights. It's Lindsay's power, red and blue.
And this was something that I wanted to do since Beyond Skyline, really just have a scene where one of the good guys piloted a tanker and beat the shit out of a bunch of aliens. And it was awesome to have them both sort of doing it in tandem. And of course I had to use the aliens line there. I mean, it just fit too perfectly. It's it wasn't force-fed, but,
And then I really love Jonathan's ad lib back that finally she's impressed. Here's an homage to Beyond Skyline itself. That was the similar shot of Trent when he was first assimilated in Beyond Skyline. I mean, this little stunt was very funny to film on set. Just one picking him up in the one set and then having Jonathan hold on to a rope and then dropping him in to the cockpit set. I think later that week. Everybody on set, we just couldn't help but crack up. And this, again, I just love the tone that we reach at this part. It's where it really is just pulp adventure fun.
Look at the proud son bringing dad home the trophy. I mean, even though Daniel has no lines in this scene, I think he's so great. Such a great physical actor. We did a bunch of takes where Alexander really turned it up and kind of snapped at Z. He's like, Z, get this man some rest. And I loved every minute of it, but I was like, let's just slowly inch the way towards the James Bond villain movie that I'm dying to unleash in the last reel. So I was just still kind of inching our way there, still tweaking the tone.
The tanker cockpit in Beyond Skyline was a fully green screen set that a great artist, Gregory Haas, really made kind of come to life. But for this one, because I had actors in there, I really wanted to build a set. And so we basically took some of the walls from our Cobalt set and put them behind there, and we did our old trusty pillars and crisscrossed them. And then a lot of this is just all great in-camera lighting from Milan. Justin Martinez added some energy layering to show the mental connection and a little bit more of a simplified version from what we did in Beyond. But we had so many more shots of it that I knew we had to kind of go with a different, more in-camera approach. And here is the cheapest prop in the movie. That is just an LED light in his hand, and it did the job.
The first takes here from the verse, there's no whiskey glass, but you can't really tell. And I was having so much fun with Alexander. I was like, we set you up with that whiskey. What if we brought that back here? And he said, absolutely. And brought it out. He did much more drunker takes. And I was like, well, I think it's probably his first glass, not his third. So, he, of course, dialed it in perfectly. Really a fan of this sequence. That previous shot of the matriarch coming in was something that we had longer and then much shorter, and I feel like we ended up just right so that you get a shot of her face and you also see the whole ship pulling off. But this is, to me, like one of the more ambitious parts of the whole film, that I had this kind of gravity destruction of a planet imagery in my head for, 15 years. One of the first scripts I ever wrote was called Singularity, and it was about a black hole on Earth destroying the planet. Of course, that was like the first thing I wrote was let's destroy the entire planet. So to be able to kind of use some of these images that I've been wanting to do in this sequence, and that shot right there of the tanker that's in the trailer is, I think, the biggest and possibly best visual effect in the entire trilogy. It was very gratifying. You got to get that whiskey glass back in there. I mean, look at that. I love it. Originally, he just said, I am become death. And I was like, let's just go for it, Alexander. He said, really? Come on. That reaction shot to Violet is actually the funniest shot to me in the whole movie. Just kind of, it's so well animated by Justin, and it's such. I mean, that to me is supposed to be funny. I don't know if people understand my sense of humor. A few of you do, and I love you.
And speaking of which, this was another part that I found very funny and obviously a lot of fun to shoot on set. Where I feel like this is a throwback is that we just had to tell so much story in every single shot. Each exterior CG of this, they're expensive, and we just couldn't make something that was like an indulgent
CG action sequence. Every single bit has to kind of get us closer to the story here. And it also goes with really one of the main reasons I use snap zooms is that you're getting 2 shots in one in the CG. So you're getting a wide and then you're kind of getting a detail. And sometimes I'll then break up the snap zoom afterwards and use it for 2 shots, which, is a good value.
The lovely Med Lab. So main unit, we shot this stare down where I love that we kind of got into this graphic novel profiles of them, which kind of to me symbolizes like you're kind of moving into a comic book style face off, and you're about to get a splash page right here, and then this then goes into the second unit fight, which was like the least worried I'd ever been about a second unit in my life, and probably ever will be, because you have Cha and Daniel as the performers, like incredible stunt performers, martial artists, actors. And then you have Jean directing, and Fong was there as well, coordinating. So it was like, I think I popped my head in at like lunch, and everyone's like, this is the fastest fight we've ever seen. And I was like, great, keep going. So, and it really did help that the set had all this sort of pre-lighting in there, so that they were free to just kind of go wild. We had these big light panels into the walls, the light underneath, with a nice safety cover over those lights, and they could just go wild. There was a little bit longer here where he actually hit onto a chair and then hit to the door and then got back up. That's really the only trim that we put in there. And there's Jonathan doing his expected father routine, pushing Rose through. We were just laughing that it felt like a bit of a pregnancy. He's the pregnancy coach, and she's grunting, pushing their way up. This was a very tricky thing visual effects wise, because obviously the CG arms aren't going to match the practical ones. We were supposed to do CG over the practical ones, but it just didn't become feasible for the budget. So by intercutting this, hopefully you don't notice it until now. Now I've ruined the whole sequence for you. So here's what I was, hinting at before, is that I think every action filmmaker at some point in their life wants to do scenes that feel a little bit reminiscent of James Bond, and this to me was a kind of classic James Bond type of scene. I noticed some British fans and critics were saying that this has a Doctor Who vibe, but I never really watched any Doctor Who. I think I saw the first Moffat one episode. So to me, this was definitely Total Recall that I was riffing on, which you can tell in the Home in Time for Cornflakes and Back to London in Time for Tea. I love Ronnie Cox in RoboCop and Total Recall. And so I was thinking of Radford here as part James Bond villain, part Verhoeven villain.
I love how Lindsay's acting, again, is telling us how much energy she has left in the tank. And just in general, I really dig that this is, both serious and fun. It's treading the line, the tone exactly the way I want, but they're all 100% invested in the moment. And I really enjoy how it all builds into Lindsay's shot here. In that line, you're gonna have to fight for it. That's sort of the energy of this whole movie. Is you can push her down, but she's not gonna give up. This sort of slow motion moment between multiple characters to get one moment here with the payoff was not something I ever did in Beyond, and it was definitely a challenge. Just a scratch, okay, that bullet just scratched Rose. But then have it kind of build and pay off into this moment with Trent. It was just very satisfying to have something in your mind and have it all kind of come out better than you hoped. This entire sequence was kind of my biggest pit of dread because we only had 4 days to shoot it,
and the blocking was quite intricate, and trying to maximize the set by shooting into all of the different corners was something I would do. After each day of shooting, I would go back and continue planning the shot list and kind of do my overhead planning for how we could have all of these fights happening at the same time within that space. Now here's Rona's one-liner that she came up with that I loved, and then this is a lot of fun of doing basically did this all in kind of a big steady cam, following them all around. The drone footage was something we got towards the end that helped fill everything out and really populate this. There you see the eye shots. She's picking them off. And then, of course, Rona goes full John Woo. And this is my favorite kill from Yayan, which was a second unit shot that I was happy I was able to be there for. And then Justin Martinez put the finishing touches on with that throat slash. Leon versus Owens was a fun fight. We shot Leon and the Master on the main unit, and then Owens was able to really knock the crap out of Leon's stunt double on second unit, and it all cut together really well. I really enjoyed this moment between Rose and Jeremy. It took us a while to find this, but the once Rose kind of started pleading and reaching out to him, it felt like they were able to really lock in and set up that whole conflict that Trent's going through. I really enjoyed bringing the set into the fight whenever I can and having them kind of banging against these big tanker claws.
It's again, we're using the same set for all of this, so I needed to have to spread everybody out and pull them apart, have all these things still feel like they're happening at the same time. Now this, in the scripted version, he said Mark, and I realized that people might have forgotten who that is, so we did the ADR of your father. And look at the look of Lindsay here. I love that. I love that fire and that intensity. And Alexander really laying it on abominations. Now this little shot here of Johnny, I think, makes this whole fight. It's just such a great, like you might get him down, but he's gonna go to the end and he'll stick a finger into your wound and grit his teeth. Now get the fuck out of my way was an ad lib by Alexander that cracked me up. And I thought was just perfect to show his disdain for even the people most loyal to him, because to him, they're not people. That's obviously a homage to Bishop's demise in Aliens, but to do it with a real-life human being, I thought would be fun. And this was a really big master on the steady that I would kind of pieced all of this together with a big roving master, and then picked off different Steadicam shots to intersect and build this together. Saw a little bit by the seat of my pants. And I kind of enjoyed this as a little homage to Beyond Skyline, that we had Eco versus a pilot, and that was a similar framing. But in this case, the matriarch's not going to fuck around with Owens. We saw that guy just completely kick the shit out of two of our adept male heroes, but she's going to show that a human's just no match for her, and bitch him out, which helps set up the final battle between Rose and the matriarch. So it was just a great feeling to feel all of this kind of coming together, the blood energizing her, and then here that was another idea that was kind of spur of the moment. It just didn't feel like the end fight was really coming together and feeling special enough, and it was like, oh, she grabs Trent's power claw and puts it on, and we bring back Mark's power claw from Beyond Skyline, so she has that on her left hand, and there was talk that it would be a plasma sword. It just didn't feel special enough. I'm so happy that I think it was Lindsay who pushed me and said, like, something's got to feel specialer here. And I remember pitching it to her that morning, and you could tell from the look on her face that it was a winner. I'm always happy to bring it back. And it hadn't appeared in the movie up until there, so it was great to get it back in and to see her on it as like a truly carrying on the legacy here.
And again, wanting to get the set involved in the fight, it made sense for the matriarch to fling that on and then go into this big sort of video game splash page comic book standoff here, which is one of my favorite shots that I've ever gotten to to do in a film, and I was really happy with the way lip sync brought it to life. There's a lot of exceptional visual effects in this sequence, and the energy wall is really a standout.
Coming up is one of my favorite Alon shots on the dolly, where I was kind of doing a steady cam on another camera, and then I came over and saw what he did, and I was like, oh, fuck, you just kicked my ass. That shot is amazing. Pulling her in to the matriarch.
Trying to come up with a satisfying ending, it felt natural to bring her in and have the tentacle come back. But now Rose, just has so much more power. And of course, we're going to face melt. If we want to be a face melter, we have to melt faces. Enjoyed how this intercut worked, and I thought Jonathan really did a great job with Jeremy, showing Trent and Leon's conflict there, and how it's each kind our heroes kind of overcoming and what we think is going to be the winning move. But of course, what I really like is how everything kind of comes together organically here. Yes, there's here's Daniel and Owen's goodbye, which is a little Terminator 2 vibes to me with he just, of course, looks like a Terminator no matter what he does. And of course, there's the aliens inspiration here, but it all kind of felt organic to what we had built up to this point. And the tentacles on the matriarch really helped build everything to here.
And sometimes, I actually think this final version is better than anything that was in the script, anything that I wrote or imagined. I really love how the stakes keep building and building here. So on set, I was reading Trent's lines, because in the script, these were the only words that he pretty clearly said. And every time I was off camera giving them to Lindsay, I would get kind of flooded with emotion, because I do feel like I am Trent in a weird way, which is probably why I named my baby boy in August after him. It was just an emotional moment, and felt like it was kind of the end of this whole emotional dynamic that had inspired me to make this movie to begin with. And just even the thought of him sacrificing himself for her got me emotional on set. So I felt like that was a great sign of what the finished scene would be. And every time I watch this, this shot here in Lindsay's face is just, to me, it's the emotional climax right here of the entire film. And I had to really convince her to do that one, because it wasn't on the schedule. We were going to actually do it on green screen. And I just looked at the set. I said, this set's too gorgeous. Why am I going to do this background as green screen? It's not going to look as good. And so Alon came up with putting the sled on the front of the dolly and having her lie there and push into it. And I think because it wasn't on the schedule, took her off guard a little bit. You have to sit there. You have a camera kind of right into your whole body, and you're screaming into the lens. It's always a vulnerable thing to ask the actor to do. And I was like, you just have to trust me. It's going to be the best shot in the movie. And luckily she did.
And delivered beyond all my expectations. I'm just so pleased with that sequence. So here is a part of the movie that, was going to be radically different even during the shoot. There was definitely a version of the movie where Trent died, and it was something that never sat right with me. It was a pre-production note that I had made work, and I liked it on the page how it had gotten, but I never felt like the tone was going to survive the fun escapist vibe that I was going towards, and I just didn't feel like his story was really over. This is still Mark's son, and if we were going to bring some idea of that back and explore in the future, it just felt like that they had more issues and more story to be resolved, more relationships to be resolved. So throughout the entire script, they had Trent and Rose had more conflict, and I just felt like sometimes that's a note people give, to really kind of sound smart, and sometimes some characters don't need that much. They have a little bit in the beginning, and they'll have arguments and stuff. But I think it's actually really important to know that characters love each other, and they don't have to always be at odds. We had enough conflict within the group. We had enough conflict with the characters. It was always really important to me to know that she loved Trent and Trent loved her. And I do thank a piece of fan art by Daphne Danielson, who I remembered seeing of Rose and Trent hugging, and it kind of reminded me that was the dynamic that I wanted to make this movie on. And so I adjusted it in prep and on the fly, and we shot 2 endings, which I'll get into later. This was obviously a big horde coming over the hillside is something I've always wanted to do. This was a really maximizing the entire setup of the tent village. It's like that's kind of our stand-in for all of Earth. It's these 3 people that we've gotten to know and care about, and we need to get her back to save the day. I really love the score in this moment. I thought Ram did a great job of kind of bringing the big Rose hero theme full circle. This drone footage was a really great tool to tell the story here and really give this moment the scope that it needed. We kind of have to condense our storytelling in moments like this. Again, it's like every shot has to tell a lot of story, but to me, this feels like, an appropriate trilogy capper in some ways, just because of this scene in itself, to have everything start with these blue lights coming down from the sky and sucking humans up into ships, and then the end we have kind of the savior of both Earth and alien kind, our hybrid, and she's sucking up aliens to save humans. It felt like a nice inversion, and thematically a good twist on where we had begun to just how crazy things have gotten. We call this the gender reveal shot. I would say it's a girl. It's kind of trying to push, not necessarily just do the old tractor beam, and we gave it some particles there, and I think it was a cool effect that Lip Sync came up with. You'll see this steady cam shots kind of bringing them together. It was definitely some symmetry to the ending of Beyond Skyline. And that film actually originally did end with a hug between Mark and Trent, which was a hilarious, whereas it worked really well here with Rona and Lindsay, and some people have noticed it as sort of a baton passing sort of scene, which I think is a beautiful sentiment that wasn't necessarily a conscious choice, but it totally makes sense to me. I just love the energy between the two of them. And I've always wanted to end a movie on a warm hug. Who doesn't? Definitely feels like a job well done. And I always love to have the heroes walk off into the sunset, although in this case, it was a thunder and lightning storm happening, and we wrapped right after that. But because that was in camera. So we did film 2 versions of this scene. I'm not going to tell you the other one because that might be something that I'd explore in a sequel. But I had to kind of throw together this other version of Trent on the day. So that was Jeremy Fitzgerald in a leotard and sort of half a helmet. And we kind of improvised and wrote this scene together with the crew, and just really, really happy how it all turned out, and the tone and the chemistry everybody has built up at this point. I like my crew. And it just felt like everything with Rose, for her inner conflicts had been resolved, and this was the missing piece still for Trent and Rose now, that they still had to find their father and get some closure to that relationship. So, maybe that will be the sequel one day. If not, you can kind of imagine your own story, but I'm hopeful. These movies somehow keep getting made. Thanks to the hard work of that man right there, Matthew Chouse, my producing partner, who is really, came on for Beyond Skyline and Skylines and was really the miracle worker behind putting these things together. Again, we brought back the blooper reel ending that we started this tradition at Beyond Skyline. And I love it for a lot of reasons. I see it as sort of a curtain call for the actors. I just remember, my older brother was an actor, and I used to go to his plays a lot growing up, and I'd always loved it when the Scarecrow and the Tin Man came out at the end and waved and bowed. And I don't know. It's just a fun thing. It actually shows, in a lot of ways, how much work goes into the movie from every department, and it just shows the incredible production design, cinematography, makeup, hair, everybody pulling together to make this intergalactic sci-fi epic on a budget and have fun doing it. You have to create that environment. It actually takes a lot of work to have people do good work and have fun doing it. It's a lot of homework. It's a lot of prep. But really, just we lucked out with this cast, and even in the place where just being in Vilnius, it's a small city. It's a small, beautiful city, but it did feel like we were all kind of in summer camp together. So every time I sent this to the different cast members to get their blessing, and they all basically said the same thing. Oh, I just miss everybody. So hopefully we get to do another. And it is sad that we're in this pandemic and we didn't get to do the festival circuit and kind of do a premiere and bring everybody back together. But that's what my special thanks was to everyone on all three movies, because each one can't exist without the one before it. And we owe a lot to each and every crew, each and every person that helped us get this far. So this last one, I will explain. She was stressing really, really hard, and she's waiting for me to cue the tentacle to get her onto the ship. And I just kind of got lost in the scene, really enjoying it and milking out the tension. And she's straining. Like I knew we already kind of had it. I was being greedy. And so finally she said, fuck you, Liam. And in that moment, I was like, oh, that's definitely going to make the blooper reel. And then it just was all the better to put the film by credit in right after that. Like I work everybody pretty hard, but at the end of the day, they are allowed to tell me to fuck off and smile, and then we'll go back and do it again. So, wow, I can't believe we made it through. I usually want to cry at the end credits. I'm going to try to make it through without doing that, but it really has been an emotional journey. It is strange to look back at 10 years of your life with the same franchise, and each one kind of takes on a different chapter. I mentioned before, I have 4 children. My son, Ronan, was a baby in the first Skyline. He's the baby on the airplane that Eric Balfour helps my wife, the baby's mother, with luggage. In the second film, my daughter Ruby played Little Rose for a shot that we did as a pickup. And then in this film, neither Pearl nor baby Trent appeared in it, but they're both very much inspirations on either side. My little Pearl, who's now 4, has definitely the spunk of a little Rose. And so Ruby, who's now 7, and Pearl were both sort of my inspirations for wanting to make just a really cool female superhero movie within my world. And so that was sort of something that I wanted to give them an update of the female heroes in this genre that I grew up loving. I wanted to do a new version for them to enjoy, and obviously for Ronan too. And then, this name Trent from Beyond Skyline, listening to Frank yell Trent for a year on set, or half a year on set, and then 2 years in post, and then to go write another movie and shoot another movie and then edit that and still hear people yelling the name Trent, and I still like the name, just felt like a really good start, a really good sign that was a good name to be in my life for the remainder of it. So named my son, who was born in August, Trent. In fact, you've probably heard them screaming in the background throughout this pandemic commentary. And so, again, the biggest thanks goes to my wife, Pet, who really none of these films would be possible without, but especially this one being gone in Vilnius for the shoot. We even did some editing at the house with Barrett and I, and she has just been my rock through thick and thin. And love you with all my heart, Pet. Thank you. Everybody else, again, I don't know how many times I can say it, but it really is just nothing short of a miracle that we've managed to make 3 of these, and that, in my opinion, we keep getting better at it. I know they're like my children. There's a special part in my special place in my heart for each film, but I just feel like at least I know on my side as a writer and then as a director, I feel like I've gotten better with each outing, and so that's why it would be fun to continue, and who knows where this will take us. But give another shout out to lip sync and the visual effects. I didn't want to get too visual effects heavy on this commentary, but it's a lot of work, and it's really impressive. And they had to take over, and learn this whole new world that I was already so immersed in, and they were very patient with me, and helped build this. Big thanks to Alexis Mincola and 3 Teeth. I was there for their first show in LA. I've known Lex since the first grade. One of my best friends in my whole life. And it just was like his music just fit the post-apocalyptic vibe so well. I was really happy that we were able to get 3 of my favorite songs that they've done into the movie. And hopefully more someday. But yeah, then again, thanks to my team at Monocular Films here, Justin Martinez, Benny Dietz, Chad, Matthew Santoro, Chris Payne, Chris Wells, Andy Davis, the animator trio, Derek Winslow, Rocco Giaffri, the legend. Thank you guys so much. I did give a special shout out to a couple of hardcore fans from the 3 films in the special thanks credit, because for me, I feel like fan art is like, it can be really, really nourishing. And like I already explained, Daphne's Trent and Rose piece that really, helped center my heart on those characters. Just seeing that illustration was like, oh yeah, that's what this movie is supposed to be about. Liam Cahill is a young artist who's done a bunch of cool stuff from Beyond Skyline and now Skylines, and posted, and just I think is probably the biggest Beyond Skyline fan in the world. And so I thank him for all his support. And Lewis did a Skylines fan trailer for us that was he did it himself, but for us, and he sent it to me, and I even gave him some feedback. I was like, you're kind of a little off on this, and then he adjusted it, and I was like, oh, that's pretty close. It's pretty damn good. So yeah, I just want to thank everybody one more time, and couldn't do it without you, and hopefully we can keep making more fun, crazy movies in the Skyline universe. Peace.